Welcome to the Survivor to Thriver show with your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Do you feel stuck, silent, and stressed? Is something hurting your heart and soul? Are you burning yourself out? If so, you are in the right place because this is the podcast people from all over the world join in to learn exactly how to stop suffering and start living with inner peace and joy. Let's get started. Last week, I found myself in a situation where I had a big time crunch, and so I had to make some really important decisions about what I was going to continue to do, which of my commitments I was going to continue to engage with, and which of them I was going to put on hold or chop off my list entirely. And one of the decisions that I made that would have impacted you personally if you've been a listener of this podcast for a while was my decision to not do my podcast last week. Now, I want you to know, of course, that when I made those decisions, I made them in a thoughtful way, and I took them very seriously. And because I made them in a thoughtful way and I took them seriously, I was able to maintain my sense of integrity and my inner peace and joy and come out of this whole experience feeling really good about the choices that I made. Now, what I really want to talk about today is that last week when I was going through this process of making these decisions, it actually wasn't a hard process for me. In that I have the skills and the tools to be able to tap into my inner wisdom, my inner knowing, and recognize pretty easily what are the best decisions for me, what are the best choices for me. And I feel so grateful, that I have that knowledge and I have those skills now, because it just has done so much to enhance the quality of my life, so much to allow me to stop suffering and start living with more inner peace and joy in my life, right? Because without these skills, without this knowledge, you can find yourself really struggling to make these decisions. And sometimes those decisions, are relatively small. And sometimes they can be related to really big and potentially life-changing events in your life. So for example, like last week, sure, the decision I was making was, okay, do I spend an extra hour or two recording my podcast, or do I use that hour or two to engage in more self-care or better self-care, including getting a little bit more sleep and making sure I had enough time to do my daily meditations, to make sure that I had a little bit of time where I could just sit and eat, and just take care of these kinds of basic needs of my body. It's like if I had decided the other way, to push through and just go ahead, just do these podcasts, it's been like, okay, so I would have been more sleep deprived. I would have been, going more hungry, going, not getting my meditation done, or not at least for as much time as I normally do. And on the one hand, if I had made that decision, I would have gotten through the week, you see, and I would have now, I now in this week, when my schedule is back to normal, like relatively speaking, because last week, you see, one of the reasons why I was in such a time crunch was because I had to go to a conference. And at that conference, it's like one of those things where I had to show up like 8 a.m. in the morning, and I was there pretty much until 10 was when the conference officially ended at night, 10 p.m. So it was like, 14-hour day right there. And guess what? The conference officially ended at 10, but that's not when my night ended, because I still had to drive back home, which luckily for me wasn't a very long drive. But, you have to come back home, you have to, take care of things. Because if you're going to be at a conference and you're going to be out all day, and you're not going to be able to focus on your work throughout the conference day, because, hey, even when they give us breaks during the conference throughout the day, I'd be like using the time during those breaks to network and to mingle and to connect with people. So it's like I really literally couldn't focus on anything else throughout the rest of the day while I was at the conference. And so because of that, like had a lot of little big things that got left undone that I normally do when I don't have a conference to go to, right? And so it's sort of like, okay, well, now you have to start making some choices, right, about how you're going to use the time that's left over. And so there are some things that you can plan for, and that I did, and I got them done in advance before, like earlier in the week, before I had to start with the conference routine, because I known the conference was coming up. But there were other things that came up for me that were unexpected and that I couldn't have planned for before, because they came up unexpectedly, right? And so I still had like all these things that were on my plate that were important, that needed to get done, and I didn't have time to do them all, right? So had to make those decisions, right? Now, but now I'm back to a relatively normal schedule for this week. So even if I had decided last week not to take as good care of myself, in terms of taking the time that I did to sleep and eat and meditate and so on and so forth, this week I would have gotten through last week, I would have arrived at this week, and I would have been able to resume my relatively normal schedule, plug back into those self-care routines, and I would have gotten through it. And even like 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, that's exactly what I would have done. I would have said, you know what, I'm going to push through. I'm going to record the podcast episodes, even if that means I get less sleep, even if that means that I don't get time to sit down and eat properly, even if that means I don't get as much time as I normally take to do my daily meditations, etc. I'm going to push through and I'm going to do these podcasts. Why? Because even 2-3 years ago, my self-care wasn't a huge priority for me. And that's the truth. It just wasn't. And it wasn't like a new thing for me to ignore my self-care either. It's a pattern that I've had for pretty much my entire life, or at least since I was very young, because the way that this pattern got developed for me was, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, then you know I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. And you know that in the aftermath of my surviving that abuse, one of the ways that I dealt with that trauma was by going into this major denial and avoidance phase where I was like, I didn't tell anybody about what I'd experienced, including anyone in my family. No one knew. And I was 8 years old, by the way, when I survived the abuse. So I had very little understanding of what I'd experienced and how it was impacting me and how it might continue to impact me. So I was really, for 12 years, I stayed in that silence. And for at least those 12 years, I was pretty much struggling all by myself, trying to figure things out and deal with what had happened all by myself. And I didn't really know what I was doing. So the best that I could do for a long time was to ignore, to deny, to avoid my feelings and what I was experiencing, and just try to pretend as if everything was okay and just move on with my life, trying to pretend as if everything was okay. But how do you experience something like child sexual abuse and successfully manage to pretend and continue with your life as if everything's okay? It's like you actually really can't do it. You see, I actually thought that I was doing a pretty good job of it. I was, because no one found out. I didn't tell anyone about what I had experienced, and no one seemed to have figured it out. No one seemed to, realize or recognize that I'd been through something like that. So I thought I was doing a pretty good job. But there were all kinds of ways in which it was in fact impacting me, and I didn't always realize or recognize what was going on. So one of the ways that it was impacting me, and I didn't recognize it, was that I developed this sense of disassociation with my body. You see, and I started to ignore my body and not care about my body, because it was my body that had been the target of the abuse, at least at the surface level, right? And so it was like my body, for me, was like a problem. It was like I didn't want to pay attention to my body, and I didn't want anyone else paying attention to my body, because I had this fear that if somebody pays attention to my body, then they may hurt me again. You see? So it was sort of like I developed a sense of disassociation with my body. And I started to ignore it. And just, I was like, when I thought of myself and who I was, I thought of myself as my mind. And I thought of myself as my feelings. And by the way, my mind and my feelings weren't exactly happy thoughts and happy feelings. But the thing was, like, I couldn't ignore my thoughts and I couldn't ignore my feelings. I couldn't disassociate with them. You see, I didn't know how to run away from my thoughts. And that's actually what I really wanted to do, was not feel the pain, the suffering, the sadness, the anger, the guilt, the shame. It was those feelings and all the thoughts that were associated with those feelings that I didn't want to experience, but I had no idea how to make them go away. I had no idea how to change them. I didn't know, so I couldn't do anything about that. But with my body, when it came to my body, I found it like relatively easy to ignore it and develop this disassociation around it. And one of the ways that it showed up in my life was that I didn't like taking pictures, like photographs, right? And I didn't like taking pictures because when I saw my pictures, I didn't like what I saw. Like I didn't like what I saw because I didn't recognize the person that I saw in the pictures that my mind knew that was supposed to be me, but I didn't recognize it as me. And I was just like, weird. And I was like, I don't want to look at my pictures. It's just weird. And the other reason I didn't like looking at my pictures, besides that weird feeling of I don't know who that is, was that the person that I saw was usually like somebody that didn't look very nice. I didn't look very nice in terms of like I didn't pay any attention to my grooming, to and self-care in that respect. So I deliberately wore clothes like the looser, the baggier, the more plain and ugly they were, the better. I deliberately went and I chose to wear those clothes because it was like I wanted to just ignore my body, and I wanted everyone else to ignore my body too. So it was like, if I look ugly, then good. People will ignore me, and then I'll be safe, right? But it was like, okay, now when I'm looking at myself in those pictures, I don't like looking at that ugliness either. And the other thing was the expression on my face. That almost always I was either not smiling and had a very sullen/sad kind of expression, and I didn't like seeing that. Or other times I'd be trying to smile and it just looked so pathetic. It just looked really wrong. Like I didn't know how to smile because I had in fact forgotten how to smile. So I just didn't like looking at my pictures. And it was just like really weird. So that was just one of the ways that this disassociation that I had developed with my body kind of showed up, like one of the symptoms. And I'm just pointing it out and I'm describing it because, hey, if you know somebody who's a survivor of trauma, they may be going through something like this. So I want you to be able to recognize these symptoms, that if, you have somebody and this could be part of what's going on for them. I mean, there are many other reasons why somebody may not be caring about the way they look, or maybe struggling to smile in a natural way, or whatever. But this could be one of the things that they're going through. And whatever they're going through, there's something that they're going through, because it's not normal for us to not care about our bodies. It's not normal for us to not know how to smile, or to be in this place where we're like, oh, I can't remember, I've forgotten how to smile. That's not normal. By normal, I mean it's not something that happens to a healthy person. You see, so there's something that they're struggling with. There's something that's going on with them that's not right. So anyway, those are some of the symptoms, right? I'm struggling with this dissociation with my body, not taking care of myself. So it was like just so easy for me to, whenever I needed to make more time in my life, for example, to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to keep pushing through. And if it's at the expense of my health, at the expense of my sense of like my well-being at a physical level, that wasn't a priority. I didn't care. I just pushed through. But now I'm at a place in my life where I'm like, I'm committed to my growth. And continually, improving myself and living with excellence, and particularly in the context of ever deepening my experience of inner peace and joy in my life, and my happiness. And I've recognized that, hey, you know what? Our mental, emotional well-being and our physical well-being, they're all very much connected with each other. If I want to continue to deepen and achieve greater levels of excellence and mastery over my well-being, even at the level of my experiencing inner peace and joy and eliminating suffering in my life, then I have to take better care of myself physically also. Because everything's interconnected, everything's interdependent, right? So now it's like as I'm conscientiously working on taking better care of myself, and I come upon this kind of scenario where I have to choose between more sleep time versus anything else on my agenda, and I make the decision to give a higher priority to my sleep, this is a huge victory for me. And it's a really important decision that I've made, for myself. And you see, the lesson also over here, by the way, in part, is that it's all about context, right? It's all about context. When you are making your evaluation or judgment or decision on what's the better choice for me, you have to consider the context within which the choices are being made. And this is also part of the reason why other people cannot determine for you what the best choice is for you, because other people do not know everything that you know about the context of your life. Before I shared with you right now, today, what I shared with you about how I've struggled with self-care in the past and how I'm now working on it in a very conscientious way. You could have looked at my decision of choosing sleep over, podcasting and been like, hey, Samia, that was not the best choice. You were very irresponsible. I mean, it could potentially, hurt your credibility, your image with your listeners, that, you just disappeared for a week. But it's like when you're making those judgments, you're making those from your perspective and with your limited knowledge of what's going on with me and who I am and why I am. and what decisions I'm making, right? But now that you know this about me, can you see, even if you disagree with my choice, can you at least see why, from my perspective, my choice made sense? Right? I mean, if you think about it from a perspective, like grounded in your sense of empathy and compassion, I've no doubt that you will be able to see, at the very least, why my choice made sense to me. See, even if you would have made a different choice for yourself, or you disagree with my choice, like you think that my reason, even if you think that my reason is not good enough, at least from a place of empathy and compassion, you can see why I might think that my reason was good enough, right? So again, you are the expert of your life. I am the expert of my life. So only you can make the best decisions for you, and only I can make the best decisions for me. This is like hugely important. Like, so when you're making decisions, that's one thing. It's like, yeah, if you need to go out and talk to people and help, and get their help in like helping you and think through the pros and cons of what you're doing, or the consequences of if you make this decision or that decision, yeah, sure, go talk to other people, get their opinion, get their feedback, but ultimately take responsibility for yourself, for your own well-being, and realize and recognize that ultimately you are the expert of your life, and you are in fact the only one who is in the best position to make the best decisions for you, not anyone else. And then love for others what you love for yourself, want for others what you want for yourself, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, so that when there are people in your life and it's time for those people to make decisions about their life, make sure that you when it's important to you, you give your feedback to them, you give your opinion to them, but do not force your decisions upon them. And if they make a choice that is different from what you think is the best or ideal choice, just humble yourself a little bit and be like, okay, you know what? I disagree with your choice, but I'm nonetheless going to respect your right to make your own choice. And I'm also, from this place of humbleness, going to trust in that you know what's best for you. And you'll make the best decision for you with what you know and what you have. See? And then insofar as I don't like your choice, or insofar as I disagree with your choice, we're going to find some alternative way to find good in what has happened. We're going to find some alternative way. And to have faith that, there's always different options. There's always different ways you can achieve any goal. So I can respect your right to make your own choices and still have faith and trust in that I can still do what's right for me and continue to move forward in a positive direction in my life. Cool? Cool. What an awesomely important lesson to learn. And once you learn it, it'll make your life so much easier and so much better. You'll be able to improve the quality of your relationships with other people so much, because just there's so much unnecessary struggle that we go through and unnecessary drama that we go through in our relationships because we insist on telling each other what to do or insist on, directing each other's lives. So just save yourself from all of that by implementing this lesson in your life. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, wrap up right here for today. And just last reminder is if this is something you find yourself struggling with in your life, remember, do not continue to struggle with it on your own. And I am one person you can reach out to for help and support. And you know how to reach me. Just go to my website at www.academyofthriving.com. Click on the Contact Us tab, and you will see how you can connect with me from there. Okay, so until we connect next time, I wish you lots of peace and joy.